Welcome to late-night horror stories and true crime. Tonight, we open a file long buried by the church. A case so disturbing it became the first and only time in U.S. history that demonic possession was used as a legal defense for murder. It began with a boy. It ended with blood. And through it all, a priest stood witness, fighting not just to save a soul, but to keep the devil from finding another door. This is the Vatican Files Brookfield, based on real events. August 14th, 1980. Brookfield, Wisconsin. The heat was unseasonable that day. I remember that detail clearly. Not the kind of warmth that comes with summer wind, but a clinging, heavy pressure. It followed me off the plane and settled in my chest the moment I stepped onto Wisconsin soil. Brookfield was a modest place, quiet streets, tidy lawns, and neighbors who knew one another by name and secret. You'd never expect to find a devil in a place like that. I was sent under instruction from the Diocese of Bridgeport, though unofficially, the Vatican had already been monitoring the case. The boy, David Glatzel, was said to be experiencing profound spiritual disturbances, the kind that went well beyond adolescent rebellion or dreams. The family's local priest had quietly flagged the matter to Rome through a back channel. Something about unnatural knowledge and levitation. The church does not move quickly in these matters. So, when they asked me to go, I knew they were frightened. I arrived at the Glatzel house around 4 p.m. It was a modest single-story home tucked near the edge of a wooded patch, the kind of place that felt tucked just enough out of sight to let nightmares grow legs. The boy's mother, Judy, answered the door. She looked worn out, face lined with sleepless nights, rosary clenched in one hand like a lifeline. "Thank you for coming, Father," she said without offering a smile. "He's in the den." Before I entered the house, I paused and did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I quietly recited the prayer to St. Michael under my breath, a habit reserved for the deeply damned. "Defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil." I stepped inside. The den was dim. The blinds were drawn and the air was thick, hot and sour. I saw him at once. David. A boy in shape and form, but not in spirit. He sat in the far corner of the room, legs pulled tight against his chest, eyes half-lidded, murmuring something rhythmic and wet. His voice had the low, phlegmy tremble of an adult man, far too large for his lungs. His skin was slick with sweat and dirt. I noted scratch marks across his forearms, some fresh, some scarred. He didn't look up when I entered. I turned to Judy. "Is he sedated?" She shook her head. "He hasn't slept more than an hour a night in a week. He says they won't let him." I nodded and stepped closer. My stole was beneath my shirt, my crucifix still tucked away. I did not want to provoke the spirit, if it was a spirit at all. So I introduced myself calmly. "David, my name is Father Morrissey. I've come to help." Still, he did not lift his head, but he spoke. "You can't help, James." That stopped me. I had not told him my first name. He began to chuckle, a low, guttural laugh that belonged to someone decades older and centuries hungrier. "I saw you in the fire," he said. "That little boy screaming, the smell of skin. That wasn't your fault, though, was it? Your mother left the stove on." My spine stiffened. No one knew that story. Not the diocese, not even the men in my seminary. It was a memory buried beneath years of spiritual armor, and yet, here it was. Spilled casually from the mouth of an 11-year-old boy in a dark room. I turned away quickly. "This is beyond a local evaluation," I whispered to Judy. "Has anyone else seen this?" Her eyes brimmed with tears. "He scratches the walls at night, draws symbols we don't recognize. He speaks to something, says it stands at the foot of his bed. He says it's not alone. I left that night shaken. Back at my rented room in town, I unpacked my copy of the Ritual Romanum. I placed my crucifix on the desk and slept with the lights on for the first time since I was a boy. August 16th, 1980. On my second visit, the boy refused to speak, but the room did. Books fell from shelves. The television turned on and off. A framed photo of the family shattered without cause. And then, the cross on the wall turned upside down. I don't mean it fell, I mean it rotated. As if watched, as if commanded. That evening I made my first report to the Archdiocese. I chose my words carefully. Unexplained manifestations. Subject demonstrates unnatural knowledge, aversion to religious icons, and capacity for manipulation of environment. Recommended surveillance, psychological testing, and formal exorcism, pending further evidence. But evidence would come quickly. August 18th, 1980. I returned for a third visit and brought holy water. I had not announced it to the family. I kept the vial in my coat. David sat in the hallway this time, silent. His breathing was shallow. As I passed, I dipped my fingers into the vial and flicked 2 drops gently toward him. The result was instant. His skin hissed. Hissed. He shrieked, clutched his neck, and backed into the wall like an animal. His head slammed backward against the plaster, and he began to bark. Yes, bark, his mouth foaming. When I stepped toward him with my crucifix exposed, he said something I will never forget. "He'll take another. You can't keep us out." And then he collapsed, entirely unconscious, the room filled with a sulfuric odor. I left the house and vomited in the hedges. August 20th, 1980. I wrote my second report to the Archdiocese, but this one I copied by hand, twice. One copy went to Bridgeport, the other to the Vatican directly. Possession confirmed, stage, manifestation. Subject, David Glatzel. Location, Brookfield, Wisconsin. Request immediate authorization of exorcism. Danger escalating. Unknown third party may be targeted next. I did not know then what I meant by that last sentence. I only knew that every time I looked into the boy's eyes, something else looked back. August 22nd, 1980. Brookfield, Wisconsin. The Glatzel family lived in a state of quiet panic. By my fourth visit, the living room had become a shrine. Candles lined the windowsills. Crucifixes hung crooked on every wall. Rosaries dangled from doorknobs like forgotten keys. The mother, Judy, rarely slept. The father, Carl Sr., said little, but his eyes were sunken, dark, already somewhere else. The boy, David, was deteriorating. He refused to eat. He growled in his sleep. And in moments of lucidity, he warned us all. "He's looking for a new house," David told me one night. "He said I was too weak. He wants someone strong, someone with a door inside their chest." At first I thought it was nonsense. The ramblings of a spiritually fractured child, until I met Arne Cheyenne Johnson. August 25th, 1980. Arne arrived at the house with David's sister, Debbie. They were a young couple, barely in their 20s. Arne had a quiet confidence, the kind of Midwestern man who worked with his hands and meant what he said. But that evening, his confidence had been shaken. He sat with me outside on the porch, the sun dipping behind the tree line. "I don't know what to believe," he said, "but I've seen him levitate. I've seen the things he says, how he moves. This ain't normal." "You believe it's demonic?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think whatever's hurting David is starting to notice me." He said that sometimes when David screamed at night, he would hear his own name whispered back, that his dreams had become violent, that shadows were standing in places shadows shouldn't be, and worse, he had begun sleepwalking. Woke up outside last night, he said, in the woods behind the house. I don't even remember leaving bed. I advised him to stay away during the ritual, to keep his spiritual distance. He didn't listen. August 28th, 1980. The exorcism began at dusk. The church had not officially sanctioned it. It was what we call a minor rite, a private plea for intercession, not a formal confrontation. I had invited Ed and Lorraine Warren to assist, knowing their experience with such cases. Though many in Rome disapproved of their methods, David was strapped to a mattress in the center of the living room. Holy water and relics had been placed around the house. The windows were sealed, the candles lit. I stood at the head of the boy and began the prayers. Exorcizo te, immundissime spiritus. Within seconds, David began to writhe. His body arched upward like a bowstring pulled too tight. His eyes rolled back. He spoke in a guttural dialect, ancient, foul, full of hatred. The room became cold, unnaturally so. You could see your breath. He laughed when I sprinkled holy water. You're too weak, the voice hissed. He's already said yes. I stopped. Who? I demanded. Who said yes? David's head snapped toward the corner of the room where Arne was standing. Him! I turned to Arne. He looked stunned, frightened. What is it? I asked. He didn't answer. He just stared at David with wide, panicked eyes. Father, he finally said, I can't move my legs. We tried to remove him from the room. Judy pulled at his arm. Lorraine tried to guide him toward the hallway. But Arne's feet would not move. He was fixed to the floor like he was rooted to it. David began to scream. His voice became high-pitched, nearly feminine. Then low, gravelly. Then many voices at once. He offered. He said, "Take me." We heard it. Then David fell silent, collapsed, as if something had left. Arne, in the same moment, dropped to his knees and vomited. The air in the room lifted, but only slightly. I knew then, without doubt, the possession had transferred. August 29th, 1980. The Church considers the concept of invitation to be sacred and binding. The devil, as we understand it, is opportunistic, but not omnipotent. It cannot simply take. It must be welcomed even subtly. In my report I wrote, it appears that during the minor rite a spiritual invitation was made. Arne Johnson expressed a verbal offer for the entity to take him in place of David Glatzel. The transfer was successful. Subject Arne is now considered high risk. I urged the family to isolate Arne, to have him blessed and watched, but they didn't listen. Arne refused help, said he was fine, said he didn't believe any of it anymore. Within days, he moved into a rental unit with Debbie and began working for a local tree company. But the damage was done, and the thing inside him was waiting. September 5th, 1980. Debbie called me in the middle of the night. "Father," she whispered, "he's not Arne anymore." She told me he'd begun pacing the apartment at night, that he'd clawed at the walls in his sleep, that he had scratched a cross into the floorboards with his fingernails. She said he spoke to things in the mirror, that he once stood over her in the dark for 3 hours, unmoving, until the sun came up. September 10th, 1980, Brookfield, Wisconsin. There is a stillness that follows true possession. Not chaos, not spectacle, a chilling quiet. In the days after the exorcism, Arne Cheyenne Johnson became silent. The Glatzel family stopped returning my calls. Debbie told me they had moved in with her employer, a kennel and dog grooming business run by a man named Bono. She said it was temporary, just until things settled. But nothing was settling. I knew what I had witnessed, and what had moved into Arne would not go peacefully. September 18th, 1980. I tried to contact Arne, repeated voicemails, letters, even a handwritten request for him to return to the church for sacramental cleansing. All were ignored. I began documenting the details on my own, collecting every incident I could from the family. Whispers in the trees, shadow figures in the mirror, a dog that refused to enter Arne's room, bite marks on Arne's arms. Human-sized but self-inflicted, Debbie mentioned that her fiancé had begun speaking about a presence behind his ribs. He described it as a coiled thing, a wolf made of smoke. On the night of February 15th, 1981, she said he told her it's hungry again. February 16th, 1981, the day of the incident. The facts are public, the truth is not. That afternoon, Arne and Debbie joined her boss, Bono, for lunch and drinks. Bono was known to be volatile, loud, controlling, and temperamental. Arne, on the other hand, was not. He was soft-spoken, never known for violence. According to witnesses, something changed that day. Something sudden. The argument started small, a disagreement over money, a schedule, but it escalated. Debbie attempted to calm them, but Arne was not himself. His shoulders were stiff, his eyes glazed. He didn't blink. He muttered under his breath in a tongue no one could understand. Then, he drew a knife. The attack was savage. Arne stabbed Bono more than 20 times, some wounds so deep they reached bone. Bono died within minutes, bleeding out in front of witnesses. When police arrived, Arne was standing calmly in the parking lot, covered in blood. He handed them the weapon without resistance and reportedly said, "He made me do it." That night, I was notified by one of the officers, a Catholic. He'd seen my card among Arne's possessions. "Father," he said, "you need to see this for yourself." February 17th, 1981. Brookfield Jail. Arne didn't recognize me at first. He sat in the corner of his cell, rocking gently, whispering something under his breath. I entered the room with a small crucifix and a prayer card in my pocket. The guards left us alone. When I called his name, he turned slowly. But the man who looked at me was not the man I remembered. His face was gaunt, skin pale, lips dry and cracked, and his eyes completely still. "He's asleep," Arne said softly. "But he'll wake up soon. He always does." I recited a passage from the Gospel of John. Arne began to tremble. "He doesn't like that one," he said. "He says you should have stopped him at the house, that now it's your fault." He leaned forward, eyes wide, and whispered something in Latin. "Non serviam." "I will not serve." Then he smiled, and I saw it, that brief flicker, that other thing, grinning behind his eyes. March 1981, July 1981. Pre-trial. The defense attorneys reached out to me and the Warrens. They asked if I'd be willing to testify that Arne had been possessed at the time of the murder. I hesitated. It had never been done. The church does not take kindly to public spectacle, and I was under strict instruction to remain silent. But I offered them my written notes, coded, careful. In court, the judge refused to allow a demonic possession defense. Such a claim is inherently theological and inadmissible in this court of law, he ruled. Arne was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter, not murder. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison. He served 5. July 1986. After his release, I met him once more. He was thinner, older. Still, something lingered behind his eyes, a wariness, a silence that never left the room. "I don't remember much," he told me. "Just darkness, hunger, like someone else had the keys to my mind." "Do you still feel it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Not always, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear it breathing." August 1st, 1981. Archdiocese of Bridgeport. Private office. They summoned me to Connecticut. I was ushered through the back entrance of the diocesan offices, past secretaries and sacristans who didn't make eye contact. I was led to a narrow conference room, stale coffee, no windows, and 2 men in black sitting at the table, both of them Vatican liaisons. One was Father Carlo Bernini. The other I had never met before. He wore a Roman collar but bore no name tag, no papers. Just a silver ring and a leather folio with the seal of the Holy See embossed into the cover. They'd read my reports, all of them. My journals, notes from the minor rite, even the brief testimony I gave the defense in Arne Johnson's trial. They let me speak for 30 seconds. Then Father Bernini raised a hand. "You are to cease discussion of the Brookfield case immediately. There will be no public record, no lectures, no sermons, no writings." I felt like a child again, scolded by men who'd never stepped into that house, never looked into the eyes of that boy or the shadow inside the man he became. "But it's real," I said. "This was possession, full transfer. This was a validation of everything we've studied, everything we're trained to identify." Bernini looked at me with eyes cold as cut stone. "We are not here to validate the devil, Father. We are here to serve Christ." August 3rd, 1981. Personal journal entry. I should have obeyed, but something inside me refused to let go, not after what I'd seen. Not when a child was nearly destroyed and a man was driven to murder under the influence of something non-human. I continued my private documentation. Quietly. Off the record. No more letters, no reports. Just a worn leather journal locked in my desk drawer and a separate key I kept on a chain around my neck. I returned to Brookfield, under the pretense of pastoral follow-up. What I really wanted was to visit the house again. August 5th, 1981. Glatzel residence. The family had moved. The house sat empty, overgrown, abandoned. A foreclosure notice was stapled to the door. The windows were covered in grime, and the grass stood waist-high in the backyard. But I had a key. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Heaviness. The kind you can't explain with emotion. The kind that clings to your skin like wet wool. There were claw marks in the hallway drywall. The den where David had levitated still smelled of sulfur. The couch was overturned. The cross on the wall had been removed. Only the nail remained. In the bedroom, I found a piece of paper on the floor, yellowed with age. On it, scribbled in a child's hand, were the words, "He said he'll come back. He just needs the right door." That night, I slept in my car. I didn't dare stay longer. August 7th, 1981. Letter to an unnamed Vatican contact, unsent. You cannot suppress evil by pretending it does not exist. You cannot silence the cries of the possessed with red tape and Latin phrases. I have seen the devil walk upright. I have felt his eyes on me in the dark. This was no hallucination, no psychosis. It was real. It is real, and you know it. I tore the letter up before sunrise. What would it matter? The church would never speak of Brookfield again. September 1981, St. Augustine Cathedral, Connecticut. I resumed my duties in quiet shame. My sermons grew colder, my prayers more mechanical. Parishioners whispered that I seemed distant, withdrawn. I began seeing things at the corners of my vision, black figures crouched just outside the reach of candlelight. Late one night in the rectory, I heard a familiar voice whisper from the shadows behind my bookshelf. "He sleeps inside you now." I turned, and nothing was there, but the air was bitterly cold. October 13th, 1981. Phone call from Debbie Glatzel. She sounded different, calmer but tired. She said Arne had begun attending church again, that he had good days now, that the nightmares had slowed, but before she hung up she said something that made my blood run cold. "Sometimes, at night, I find him standing in the kitchen, just staring at the window, smiling, like he's listening to something." "Have you asked him why?" I said. "I did once," she whispered. He said, "It's almost time again." November 1st, 1981. Feast of All Saints. Private journal entry. There are certain nights when the veil is thin. I felt it pressing in during Mass this evening. The incense didn't mask it. The choir couldn't lift it. I saw parishioners looking over their shoulders as if someone else was in the pews. There was nothing visibly wrong, nothing concrete. And yet I felt it again, that same oppressive pressure I felt in the Glatzel home, the one that clings to your bones. I returned to the rectory and locked the door. I haven't slept in days. November 6th, 1981. Anonymous envelope, left on church steps. I found it while opening for morning prayer. A manila envelope, no return address, no markings. Inside, 6 photographs. The first showed a crude wooden table covered in ash, with a burned crucifix nailed upside down to the center. The second, a child's bedroom wall with claw marks gouged into the plaster, identical to the ones in David's hallway. The third, a hand-drawn sketch of a creature with long limbs, no face, and teeth that seemed to continue past the jawline. Beneath it, in a child's shaky handwriting, he says it's his turn, now. The rest were worse. One showed my church taken from the outside, at night. Another my bedroom window from just beneath the bushes. The last was the inside of my confessional, the curtain slightly parted. My stole and Bible sat on the bench. Whoever took them had been inside. November 10th, 1981. Meeting with Lorraine Warren, undisclosed location. I met with Lorraine alone. Ed had grown ill. She'd aged quickly in the months following the case, as if the stress had eaten time from her directly. She brought a journal, hers, and placed it on the table without a word. "I think you were right," she said. I opened the book. Inside were details from dozens of other cases, rural homes mostly, always involving a child first, then a young man, then a rupture, violence, fire, or madness. She pointed to a scrawled page near the back, dated 5 years prior. It simply read, "He waits in the boy, but he walks in the man." "Do you believe Arne is still possessed?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "Not anymore." "Then where is it now?" She looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's looking for a priest." November 21st, 1981. Night visit, St. Augustine Cathedral. I awoke at 3:12 a.m., a time I've come to dread. My bedroom light was off. I don't recall turning it off. At the foot of my bed stood a figure. Not a dream, not a shadow. It stood still, too still, like a mannequin waiting to be filled with something foul. The crucifix on my wall turned downward. I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't open. Then it stepped backward into the dark, never blinking. I lay there until sunrise, soaked in sweat, heart pounding like a funeral drum. When I rose, I found words scratched into my mirror. You let him in. December 3rd, 1981. Letter to Rome, never sent. This is not over. The Brookfield case was never just about David or Arne. It was about entry, about testing the walls. What if we were not the gatekeepers, but the test subjects? What if each possession is just a rehearsal for something larger, something permanent? We think of the devil as singular, but what if he is not alone? What if evil is not a being but a network, and we've already been catalogued? I burned the letter after writing it. December 25th, 1981, Christmas midnight mass. The cathedral was packed. I stood behind the pulpit, candlelight flickering against stained glass. Halfway through the homily, I saw a boy, 8 or 9, sitting in the third pew, alone, pale skin, blank stare. He grinned when he saw me. I stumbled, lost my place. When I looked back, he was gone. After Mass, I checked the tapes from the new security cameras we'd installed weeks prior. There was no boy in the pew, but in one frame, just after communion, you can see a dark shape crouched near the altar rail, long limbs, crouched, head tilted toward the congregation. I closed the file and removed the drive. Final entry, January 1st, 1982. Restricted, Vatican Archives, Level 3 Containment. The Brookfield case is closed. David Glatzel survived. Arne Johnson was freed years later. He married Debbie. The public moved on. The headlines faded. But I know the truth. The demon wasn't cast out. It was released. And it's looking for another house. Maybe a boy. Maybe a man. Maybe a priest who once tried to stop it and failed. I have no more prayers to offer. Just warnings. Do not speak its name. Do not challenge it. And above all else, do not open the door. Thank you for joining us for this terrifying journey into the Vatican files. The case of David Glatzel and Arne Cheyenne Johnson remains one of the most chilling examples of alleged demonic possession in American history. But whether you believe the devil was truly at work in Brookfield, or if something even darker was invited in, one thing is certain: evil never knocks. It waits for the door to open. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll see you again at the hour when the veil grows thin. Good night.